The moment you open your mouth to explain yourself, something invisible shifts. Not the facts, not the truth, but position. An accusation lands. A sideways comment, a doubt about your competence, a twist of your words by someone close to you. Your chest tightens. Stress rise. Your mind tells you the story is being distorted and must be corrected immediately. Silence feels dangerous. So you speak. You clarify. You justify. You add context. You explain your intent. It feels reasonable. It feels mature. But the act itself has already changed the structure of the interaction. By explaining, you accept a role you were never formally given. The role of the defendant. No one declared themselves a judge. Yet you behave as if one is present. You have entered a courtroom that does not exist. The world does not judge people by truth alone. It judges posture, urgency, emotional leakage. Truth delivered calmly carries weight. Truth delivered desperately signals dependence. The difference is not intelligence. It is frame. Whoever holds the frame decides who is reacting and who is stable. The moment you explain, you react. And reaction reveals far more than words. What it reveals is not the facts. It reveals what you are protecting. Your intelligence, your morality, your worth. When you say, I am not stupid, I am not selfish, I am not careless, you have just highlighted the pressure points in your identity. From that moment on, the interaction is no longer about what happened. It is about where it hurts. Most accusations are not made to discover the truth. They are probes, tests, a line thrown into the water to see if something bites. When you rush to explain, the signal is clear. You are hooked, and once someone knows, you will jump. They can pull whenever they choose, with a tone, with silence, with disappointment. You do not need to be controlled directly. Your nervous system does the work. This pattern rarely begins in adulthood. It is learned early. As a child, explanation was survival. Authority accused. Punishment loomed. The only escape was convincing language. You learned that safety depended on persuasion. You learned that someone else always held the verdict. Your body remembers this even when your mind does not. So, you move through adult life treating bosses, partners, strangers, and critics as judges. Every accusation feels urgent. Every explanation feels necessary. From the outside, this looks like communication. Internally, it is submission dressed as reason. A person who knows their position does not scramble to defend it. Power does not announce itself. It remains still and lets others reveal themselves through motion. When you explain yourself, you are not wrong. You are exposed. You have not lost an argument. You have accepted the game. And once the game is accepted, facts become secondary. What matters is who fills the silence first and who needs approval to breathe. Many people stay trapped here, not because they lack clarity, but because they confuse explanation with control. They believe that if they explain better, tension will dissolve. Instead, tension sharpens, because now everyone in the room knows something important. You care deeply about how you are perceived, and when that becomes visible, it never goes unnoticed. Long before you decide what to say, your body has already moved. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, blood shifts. This is not a flaw in character. It is biology. Human nervous systems evolved inside hierarchies, not debates. When a challenge appears, the body does not ask whether it is fair. It asks whether status is threatened. And when status feels threatened, the body pushes toward appeasement or defense. This is why explanation feels urgent. It is not a thoughtful choice. It is a reflex. Stress hormones narrow perception. In that narrowed state, silence feels unsafe. Stillness feels like exposure. Your system believes that if you do not speak now, you risk rejection. So you rush to close the gap. You talk faster. You add details. You search for the sentence that will stabilize the situation. What you are really doing is trying to regulate the other person so your own body can calm down. Appeasement never stabilizes power. It feeds it. The moment you explain, you communicate dependence. You signal that your internal balance relies on their response. Humans sense this instantly, not logically, but physically. The room changes. The other person feels leverage, even if they cannot explain why. Once that leverage exists, it rarely disappears on its own. This is how patterns form. At work, in relationships, online. Someone disapproves and you lean forward. Someone doubts you and you provide proof. Someone misunderstands and you rush to clarify. Over time, you become predictable. Predictability does not create safety. It creates access. Manipulative personalities understand this instinctively. They are not interested in facts. They are interested in reactions. Control is established the moment your nervous system synchronizes with theirs. When you mirror their urgency, they lead. When you chase understanding, they set the pace. Silence disrupts this loop because it interrupts the biological script. When you do not respond immediately, your body learns something new. It waits. That pause is not passive. It is regulation. It signals that your stability does not depend on the stimulus. That signal travels faster than words ever could. Many people confuse silence with weakness. In reality, uncontrolled speech is the leak. Silence holds pressure. Speech releases it. Whoever holds pressure controls the interaction. This is why rooms shift when one person stops filling space. Others feel compelled to do it instead. The urge to explain is often justified as honesty or openness, but honesty does not require urgency. Openness does not require submission. Urgency comes from fear. Fear of being misread. Fear of losing approval. Fear of falling in the invisible hierarchy. When that fear is visible, it becomes an entry point. Once you see this, behavior that once felt personal becomes mechanical. A comment here, a pause there, a reaction expected. If you rush in, the pattern continues. If you stay still, the pattern weakens. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming centered. A centered system does not need to hurry. It does not need to convince. It remains where it is. When you stop explaining, you are not withholding truth. You are refusing to manage someone else's emotions at the cost of your position. That refusal changes the structure of the interaction before any technique appears. Every confrontation carries a hidden structure, not of words, but of roles. One person speaks as if evaluating. The other responds as if being evaluated. The moment you explain, that structure locks in. One stands, one bends, one questions, one answers. No one announces this shift. It happens automatically. Most people believe conversations are horizontal. They are not. They are vertical. Whoever asks the questions claims the higher position. Why did you do that? What were you thinking? How could this happen? Each question implies authority. When you answer, you confirm it. You may be accurate in every detail, but accuracy does not change hierarchy. This is why explanations rarely resolve conflict. They extend it. Every answer invites another question. Every clarification opens another angle of judgment. The interaction turns into an audit of your motives, your competence, your character, and the auditor never needs to justify themselves. Silence collapses this structure. When you do not answer, The question has nowhere to land. It hangs. The authority it carried dissolves back onto the person who asked it. Suddenly, they are exposed. They are speaking into space without receiving submission in return. This moment feels dangerous to people conditioned to explain. They believe silence equals loss. In reality, silence removes the entire game. Without a defendant, there is no trial. Without answers, questions lose power. What remains is simply an opinion. Unsupported by compliance, you can observe the shift immediately. The other person often speaks again, softer, less certain. They qualify. They retreat, not because they discovered empathy, but because the frame they attempted did not hold. Their power depended on your participation. Refusing the role is not aggression. It is neutrality. You are not escalating. You are declining. You are not proving innocence. You are stepping out of a structure that never served you. When you stop entering this invisible courtroom, accusations change texture. They lose urgency. They sound smaller, not because they are harmless, but because they no longer dictate your position. They become noise rather than verdicts. At this stage, relationships begin to shift. Some adjust, some strain, some quietly fade. Not because you attacked anyone, but because you stopped offering yourself for judgment. Nothing dramatic was said. Nothing was asserted. You simply remained where you were, and that was enough to reveal who expected you to kneel. Silence is often mistaken for emptiness. In reality, silence is pressure held in place. When words stop, tension does not disappear. It concentrates. Most people rush to speak because they want relief. They fill the space to calm themselves. They do not realize they are also relieving the other person. Manipulation depends on motion, on reaction, on emotional output. When you defend yourself, you give friction to push against. When you justify, you give surface area to grip. Silence removes both. It turns the interaction into a vacuum, and the human brain is uncomfortable in a vacuum, especially when hierarchy is being tested. Controlled silence feels different from passive silence. Passive silence leaks fear. The body tightens. The eyes dart. The stillness feels apologetic. Controlled silence is grounded. Breath steady. Face neutral. Body unmoved. The message is not hostility. The message is stability. When this kind of silence appears, something predictable happens. The other person speaks again. Not stronger, but weaker. They soften their words. They add qualifiers. They partially retract. They begin explaining themselves. The pressure they created returns to them because there is nowhere else for it to go. This reversal is not intimidation. It is absence of compliance. You did not attack. You did not escalate. You simply did not provide the response they expected. Without your reaction, their action loses direction. Silence also protects information. When you speak defensively, you leak data about yourself, values, insecurities, sensitivities. Silence leaks nothing. It is a dark surface. People project onto it and end up confronting their own tone. This is why unreadable people feel heavy in a room. Not threatening, heavy. Their presence does not bend easily. Their boundaries are not announced. They are sensed. Silence does not mean refusing to communicate. It means refusing to justify your worth. It means allowing misunderstandings to exist without rushing to disinfect them. That discomfort is not danger. It is withdrawal from a dependency on being understood. When silence becomes familiar, your nervous system learns a new rule. Safety does not require immediate appeasement. Over time, your pace slows. Your reactions shorten. Your availability to be pulled decreases. At that point, Silence stops being a tactic. It becomes posture. You are no longer trying to win interactions. You are maintaining position, and from that position, words regain weight. Silence is not the goal. Stability is. There are moments when words are necessary. Conversations continue. Decisions are made. The mistake is believing that when you speak, you must defend. Defense pushes against force. Pushing validates the force. It confirms that the accusation matters enough to require resistance. A different approach changes everything. You do not push, you pull. You acknowledge sound without accepting meaning. You separate facts from the story attached to them. When someone accuses, you do not dismantle the accusation. You let it pass through and address only what is real. This is where many people lose power. They argue the label instead of handling the action. They try to erase an identity rather than clarify a detail. The label is bait. Fighting it grants it authority. Ignoring it collapses it. Ownership without shame is the pivot. You can admit an error without absorbing an insult. You can state what happened without defending who you are. A report has mistakes. A deadline was missed. A tone was sharp. Facts acknowledged. Character untouched. This signals something rare. Security. Insecure people fight to prove they did not fail. Secure people correct and move on. When you respond this way, attacks shorten. Accusations lose frequency. Not because others became kinder, but because the interaction no longer pays. Words used without defense are clean. Minimal. They do not seek agreement. They state reality and stop. This creates distance, not coldness. Distance. Distance makes you hard to move. When you stop trying to convince, your speech changes texture. You speak less. You say more. You do not complete the other person's emotional arc. You let their tone remain theirs. You do not rescue them from the discomfort they introduced. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. Clarity about where responsibility ends. Clarity about what you will no longer carry. As this becomes habitual, communication simplifies. Fewer explanations. Fewer negotiations. Fewer invisible trials. What remains are interactions that do not require performance, and in that simplicity, control quietly returns to where it belongs. Every attack tries to do the same thing. It tries to name you. Arrogant, selfish, incompetent, cold. The label is not the weapon. The movement you make when the label appears is the weapon. The moment you rush to remove it, you step into the trap. You accept the premise that the name has power over you. Most people believe identity must be protected. They believe if a label sticks, damage follows. That belief gives the label weight. Without that belief, the word floats. It passes through without landing. This is why some insults feel sharp and others feel absurd. Not because the words differ, but because the listener does. Labels hurt when they touch something unfinished inside you. Not because they are accurate, but because they resonate. A person secure in their competence does not panic when called incompetent. A person grounded in their values does not scramble when accused of lacking them. The body stays still because there is nothing to defend. This is the part most people avoid. Attacks reveal unintegrated areas, not as punishment, but as information. The parts of yourself you deny are the parts others can control. The parts you accept become unreachable. When you know your capacity for selfishness, the word selfish loses its sting. When you know you can be wrong, the accusation of error becomes neutral data. This is not self-criticism. It is self-knowledge, not affirmation, not positivity, knowledge. When you know your range, insults stop functioning as weapons. They become reflections of the speaker rather than verdicts about you. Projection becomes visible. Intention becomes obvious. Manipulative behavior depends on your denial. It needs you to insist that you are not what is suggested. It needs you to cling to a fragile image. When you stop clinging, leverage disappears. The same words may be spoken, but they no longer move anything. At this stage, reactions change. You no longer flinch at names, not because you are numb, but because you are complete enough to hold contradiction. You can be capable and mistaken, generous and self-interested, calm and firm. None of these states threaten your position. Some people lose interest here. Some push harder and find nothing to grab. What remains are interactions that do not require you to perform or prove. They are quieter, heavier, more grounded. You are no longer defending an image. You are standing in a reality you already understand. At the deepest level, this has never been about silence, or techniques, or clever responses. It has always been about authority, where it lives, who you hand it to. Most people place authority outside themselves, in reactions, in approval, in agreement, in the emotional weather of other people. As long as authority lives there, explanation feels necessary. Defense feels automatic. You are waiting for a verdict that never truly arrives. When you stop explaining yourself, you withdraw from that system. Not aggressively, not dramatically. You simply stop participating in the economy of justification. You no longer trade energy for understanding. You no longer perform coherence to earn safety. You remain where you are without commentary. This is what sovereignty feels like. Calm, slightly uncomfortable at first. Quiet. Your pulse no longer spikes when someone misunderstands you. Accusations lose urgency. Silence feels stable instead of dangerous. The world does not suddenly become kinder. It becomes clearer. Some people react to this shift. They push harder. They provoke. They try to pull the old response back into place, not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer predictable. Others step back, not out of fear, but recalibration. The dynamic has changed, and dynamics resist change. You do not explain this change. You do not announce it. Authority that needs explanation is already compromised. The moment you try to justify your boundaries, they stop being boundaries. There is a cost here. You may be misunderstood for longer. You may be seen as distant. You may lose access to people who relied on your reactivity. This is not loss. It is shedding. What remains is lighter. Fewer negotiations. Fewer internal trials. Fewer moments spent managing perception. Over time, something stabilizes. Your words regain density. When you do speak, people listen differently, not because you dominate, but because you are not asking to be believed. You state, you observe, you act, you let outcomes speak where explanations once stood. This is how the game ends, without confrontation, not by winning, but by refusing the premise. No courtroom, no judge, no verdict, only actions. Boundaries, and the quiet presence of someone who no longer needs to be cleared. When you stop explaining why you exist, you begin to exist on your own terms, and that shift is felt, even when nothing is said.